الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الله أكبر لله الحمد. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا تقيا ولا محروما. اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. Welcome to the first class of Tafseer in Ramadan. Inshallah, again, unless the numbers I thought the majority of the class would be here, but the 8:30 on a Sunday would be more difficult. SubhanAllah. If we still get, again, we don't have quorum of the credit students. We may send out a survey after today if we don't get any more folks, inshallah, and we will gauge if there's another time. But I don't want to punish people who came on an agreed time. So if there is no time that works for most people, other than this time, we will stick to this time, because I don't want to punish somebody who picked the time and came to it and fulfilled their obligation, inshallah, to the class. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the assignments were due last week. If you haven't submitted it yet, please do so. Just to kind of give you a breakdown of what we have left. So we have, I think, about 4 classes left in Ramadan, in this term. The term ends end of April. Now, end of April we know is Eid. So I think we've got, after today, we have the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th. So 3 more classes after today. So whatever we get to is what we get to, inshallah. My goal is to get to at least complete Buruj and also Tariq and potentially A'la. And that's the goal, inshallah. Now, the end of the year, end of the course, or end of the term exam will be held after Eid, obviously, because I'm not going to let people take their time away from their families and from celebrating the completion of their fasting and their worship. So the exam will be sometime in May, and it will only include material of the first 2 clusters of the tafsir. So can somebody remind us what was the first cluster? Yes, Muhammad? Yes, the first 3 surah are the first cluster. Very good. The second cluster of surah, where do we go to? Yes, Muhammad. Ahmed. Okay, go ahead. So a little bit more. Yes, Muhammad. So from Takwir, Infitar, Mutaffifin, and then we have 2 more surah. So the next 5 surah, JUZ Amma, right? So we finish, this is the 3rd surah we're going to finish today, inshallah, and then 2 more surah that we will talk about. So this is in the next slide. From Takwir to Al-Buruj. So the exam will be up to and including Al-Buruj, inshallah. And we'll talk about what the cluster kind of summarizes in a bit. Inshallah, that will cover the first term. The second term, we will start cluster 3 and 4, inshallah. Okay. Any questions? All right. So let's get started. So we're in the second cluster of JUZ Amma. Again, JUZ Amma is a JUZ that summarizes the main concept of the Quran. Every detail that these concepts present is in the rest of the Quran. JUZ Amma came to summarize the main concepts of Islam and the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. And so that's why we are covering JUZ Amma, because if you understand JUZ Amma and what every surah talks about and every word means, you basically have sufficient information and knowledge to live your life as a Muslim. Now, does that say we shouldn't study the rest of the Quran? No. It's great to study the rest of the Quran, because that's how you get the details, that's how you get the stories and the analogies that further explain these main concepts in the Quran. But we're sticking with, obviously, JUZ Amma to start, because that builds the foundation. We said JUZ Amma is, we can break it down into 4 clusters. The first cluster we talked about already, so I won't go into detail with that. It talks about the essential components of deen. And remember, deen, what does deen mean? Anyone remember what deen means? You want to try? Okay, yes. Yeah, so deen is when somebody has tadayyun, they understand that they have an obligation and a responsibility to the creator, right? Or to a divine, right? So somebody without deen, somebody who denies that there is a higher power, like God, right? Feels that they have they don't have a deen. They don't have a responsibility or a duty towards anyone. So somebody who's Muslim understands that I have a responsibility and a duty and an obligation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that deen is Islam. That's the responsibility that specifically we could talk about, right? But deen as a concept is somebody who feels or understands that they have an obligation towards a higher being or a divine power. So that is the first cluster. The second cluster talked about choice. Choice from different angles. So we talked about Surah At-Takwir, which started off this cluster and talked about the sanctity or the sacredness of the fact that we have freedom to choose. We have a freedom to choose that no other creation besides jinn have. And that freedom of choice was given to us by Allah. The fact that we could do what we want, anytime we want, to a certain point, obviously, whatever we're capable of, that is a gift and something that's sacred that was given to us by Allah. And that's something important. We should not take that lightly. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us that ability to will and choose what we want, then we have to take it seriously. And that's the second surah that came. We talked about Surah Al-Fitar that talked about, okay, well, with the ability to choose, that freedom of choice we're going to be held accountable to it. You're not just given, choose whatever you want, and whatever you do, it's okay. There's no consequence, there's no accountability, there's no recording. No, it comes with an accountability. You will be asked about those choices that you've made. I will be asked about those choices that I've made. So there is an accountability that Surah Al-Infitar talked about. And now we got into Surah Al-Mutaffifin. And Surah Al-Mutaffifin, again, talks about the concept of choice, but from the perspective of all your choices are recorded. And not only they're recorded, but there's consequences to those choices. And those choices that you take, the consequences are not just hereafter, but also in dunya. Every choice has a consequence. We'd love to believe that everything we do, there's nothing that, you guys have you heard of that terminology, the butterfly effect or the domino effect? That our choices, the things that we do, our actions that we take, dictate what happens after. Right? Every action is a result of a previous action, right? And there's a trickle down effect. And so there's consequences to our choices. And we have to acknowledge that those are going to happen in this world and in the next world. And we saw that in the beginning of Surah Al-Mutaffifin. Surah Al-Mutaffifin, when we started to talk about that surah, which is covering this concept, talks about the recording and the consequences. The surah starts off with an example. وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ. Right? Wail, we said it's a warning. Right? We said ya waylak, right? In Arabic, we say ya waylak. I'm warning you that something is going to happen to you. Some scholars say wail is also a very severe part of Nar Jahannam, the lowest part. And so the lowest part is for people who are mutaffifin. What are mutaffifin? Anyone remember? Yes. Yeah, so exactly. So when people are interacting with them, they expect to get their full measure, right? Their full right they get, but when they deal with others, it's okay to take their rights away or their full measure away. So الذين إذا اكتالوا على الناس يستوفون, they make sure that in any transaction or interaction, they get their full measure. I get exactly what I paid for. Or not just in financial transactions, but even in dealing with people, right? This person wronged me, I take my full right from them. وَإِذَا كَالُوهُمْ أَوْ وَزَنُوهُمْ يُخْسِرُونَ. But if it's the other way around, they're okay to have the other person lose when it comes to their benefit. So when I wrong somebody, I don't have to fix it. But when somebody wrongs me, they have to fix it. When I buy something, I make sure I get fully. But when somebody buys from me, I could take away a little just to get, again, to gain that benefit. Yes. Yes, they're not holding themselves to the same standard. So what do we call that in English? What do we call that in English? Double standard, right? Double standard. So al-mutaffifin are people who have double standard. And we saw this on a big scale and the small scale. What's the big scale? Well, the big scale is, in matters of, again, this person hurt me, so I take my full right, and they're jailed or whatever the consequence is for that action. When it comes to me, I'm not held to that standard. Or it could be as small as, not small, because mutaffifin, that characteristic is not small, right? But when we look at it and we say, it's not a big deal, it is a big deal. Whether it's telling our kids, did you do your Quran today? Did you memorize your Quran? Did you review? And then us ourselves, when we're asked about our Quran, we're not doing it. Or the screen, right? Screen time. We talked about the screen time. We tell our siblings or others, limit your screen time. Too much screen time. But for us, we don't hold ourselves to that standard. It's day-to-day transactions. We expect our spouses to be a certain way to us, but for us to our spouses, it's okay. We don't have to be at a certain standard. And we sometimes fall into that, so we have to be careful. وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ. It's a warning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we talked about, again, we'll emphasize this point, أَلَا يَظُنُّ أُولَٰئِكَ أَنَّهُمْ مَبْعُوثُونَ. Do they not think that one day they will be resurrected and they will have to answer? They will be accountable, right? They will be accountable for their choices to be mutaffifin. يَوْمَ يَقُومُ النَّاسُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. And it's important to talk about that because we're going to go back to those ayats when we address the next section of the surah. Because the next section, well, the section after the introduction is كَلَّا إِنَّ كِتَابَ الْفُجَّارِ لَفِي سِجِّينٍ. We talked about that. The book of al-Fujjar. Fujjar is a general characteristic. What does it mean? What does Fujjar mean? Yes. Yes. Fujjar doesn't talk about your belief. It doesn't address concepts of belief. It talks about how somebody carries themselves out in their actions, in their conduct. Somebody who's fajr has a poor code of conduct, right? Versus abrar, which is the opposite, which is somebody who has virtuous code of conduct, which we'll talk about the next half of the surah, right? So, كَلَّا إِنَّ كِتَابَ الْفُجَّارِ. The book of the Fujjar is in Sijjin, and that Sijjin word is a new word to Arabs at the time when it was revealed, the Sahaba. And if you look at the root is Sajan, jail. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا سِجِّينَ. And what do you know about Sijjin? كِتَابٌ مَرْقُوم. This concept of a book, marqum. It's recording everything. Everything is written down. Recording of our actions. Right? So the question is, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ. And what do you know of Sijjin? The answer is كِتَابٌ مَرْقُوم. It's a recorded, all your actions are recorded. Why is that important? Because we're going to talk about that again in the next half. Okay? The surah then talked about everything you do is going to be recorded. And then we further went into the details of so not only are they recorded, but there's consequences. There are consequences to our actions. What are they? وَيْلُ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلْمُكَذِّبِينَ. Now وَيْلُ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلْمُكَذِّبِينَ is an ayah that you will find several times in the Quran. Right? Several times. It is here. وَيْلُ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلْمُكَذِّبِينَ. Wayl. Again, warning to المكذبين. What is مكذب? Who is a مكذب? What does a مكذب mean? This is all terminology that will be on the test. Yes. So liar is a specific application of it, but it's a yes. So they know the truth, but they do whatever, they convince themselves otherwise because they don't want to adopt it. They want to deny it. They understand this is the truth, but they convince themselves. He said, well, this person really doesn't see this as a problem. Well, they may have seen it, but they've convinced themselves otherwise because it was clear in the beginning. And that's what the nature of the human is, that the human tries to justify actions because no human will do an action that they know is wrong that they can't justify. It's really difficult to do that. Once you come to terms that you can justify this action, whether you're the exception because you have some sort of circumstance, or your case is different than other people, those are all justifications we give ourselves to do certain things that we shouldn't be doing, right? So it's a white lie, or this person harmed me, so I have the right to do that, right? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. The point is, we justify things before we do them. Somebody who's a mukaththib has come to terms with something that say, no, I reject this. So they know it's true, but they reject it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَيْلُ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلْمُكَذِّبِينَ. And what do these mukaththibin do? الَّذِينَ يُكَذِّبُونَ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ. They reject the day of deen. What's deen? Deen is accountability, right? The day of accountability. So when I deny a day of accountability, that means I know I won't have to answer for my, I don't believe I have to answer for my actions or my decisions or my choices. So I can do them. I can do whatever I want. الَّذِينَ يُكَذِّبُونَ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ. So they understand that there's Yawm al-Din, but they deny it because it's easier to justify that. وَمَا يُكَذِّبُ بِهِ. Again, the word takdhib, right? وَمَا يُكَذِّبُ بِهِ إِلَّا كُلُّ مُعْتَدٍ أَثِيمٍ. Who does the takdhib? Somebody who has two characteristics, mu'tadin and athim. What's mu'tadin mean? Does anyone remember? Sorry? Transgress, but transgress towards what? Others. Mu'tadi is somebody who transgresses against people, right? Against the right. Athim is, yeah, you're sinful. So when you're committing sin that may not affect other people, you're transgressing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So mu'tadin, athim, is somebody who transgresses people, against people. They don't believe they have accountability towards others, so they can step on their throats, right? They step over them to get to places in life, right? Mu'tadi and athim, somebody who chooses a lifestyle of haram, or to engage in haram. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. So no matter how much these people are reminded of the truth of their wrong actions towards others or towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have takdhib, right? They have takdhib. They will not, although they know, they may, initially they know that it's wrong, they deny it and they say, and they reject it and they don't believe in it. So they're okay, they justify their actions. إِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِ آيَاتُنَا قَالَ أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. And then if our verses are revealed to them, they would say these are fables of old. كَلَّا بَلْ. Remember that term, كَلَّا بَلْ? Kalla is to negate, right? And then bal is to say what's coming is actually what the truth is, right? So kalla bal, again, this is a common term what we've seen already in JUZ Amma. negating the past, what the point that they were making is, and the truth is what actually is about to be said. So, كَلَّا بَلْ, the reason why they have takzeeb of accountability, of the Day of Judgment, is not because it's fables of old, but because رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ, they have a stain over their hearts. How do you get a stain over your heart? Right? We mentioned the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the meaning of which, we mentioned it last week, every sin we do, every mistake we engage in, is a black dot on our heart. And no matter how small we label our mistakes or our sins, they start accumulating those black dots until the heart is covered with a stain. And that's the ran. كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. What they used to earn, again, it's a consequence. Earning is a consequence of an action, right? When you go to work, right? Why do you go to work? So that you earn income. A stained heart is a result of choices. كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. And so that's the consequence of our choices. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a consequence. It's not just akhirah consequence, it's the dunya. The problem with a stained heart is that the light of Allah can't penetrate it. We have to do something about it to clean it, to polish it. We mentioned last week, it's like a surface that's dirty, right? If you don't clean the surface of your table for a day, the next day you can wipe it, it's probably easy. But if you leave the table to get dirty and you don't clean it for a month, and now you try to clean it, it's extremely difficult. You need some sort of corrosive chemical to just get rid of the initial surface. And that's the problem with the stained heart. As we leave it to stain over time with every sin, every choice we take, it becomes harder to clean. The way to clean it is to always look at our actions, look at our choices, and obviously ask for forgiveness for those choices that are wrong, that are causing those black dots to accumulate, and refraining from those black dots. Right? If you know something is going to make your carpet dirty, then you won't use it. Right? You'll tell your kids not to drink this purple drink in the living room, right? Because you know that, so you'll avoid it. And that's the heart. It's the stain. The problem is, once your heart is stained, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that, you can't see right from wrong. You can't see right from wrong. You can't tell halal from haram. And so when you see somebody who kills someone, you say, how do people kill kids? How do people separate kids from their families? How do people, throw these innocent, men in jail? How? Explain all of this. رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ. رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِم. People can't tell right from wrong anymore. And it's a slippery slope. And that's why it is upon us to make sure that we purify our hearts and make sure that they don't become stained over time. Because, and we're all subject to this, right? We talked about how the imagery on TV, when you watch people under the rubble in an earthquake, first day you might break down in tears. But over time, when you see children that are dying from bombing from an oppressor, we don't have that same effect anymore. Why? Because our hearts have run. We're used to it. There's the truth is it's hard to get emotional now because our hearts they're not clean. And that's the danger. And we have to examine our hearts and see where, I'll tell you out of experience, there's things that used to bother me a lot when I was younger. Actions, right? I'm not talking about things that are annoying. I'm talking about things that are actually haram. And now when you see them, that you may not be so bothered anymore. And then you say to yourself, why? Why am I not? Right? Is that something wrong with me? Because the action hasn't changed. Something's changed. كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. So that's the consequence in dunya. What's the consequence in akhirah? كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ كَلَّا إِنَّهُمْ عَنْ رَبِّهِمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ لَمَحْجُوبُونَ. The consequence of the choices that are made, which are recorded by the way, in the akhirah is عَنْ رَبِّهِمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ لَمَحْجُوبُونَ. They are covered from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the Day of Judgment, they will not see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah will not talk to them. And we said the analogy last week, لِلَّهِ الْمَثُلُ الْأَعْلَى وَبِلَا تَشْبِيهٍ, that if you and your siblings are all together and your parents walk in and they greet all of your siblings and they hug them and they ask them about their day and they don't even look at you, as if you weren't even in the room, or acknowledge your existence. And they talk to everybody else, all your siblings, and they walked out of the room. How would you feel? Yeah, it's not a nice feeling. What about when that happens on the Day of Judgment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That Allah addresses His righteous, the believers, and He doesn't look at us, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. That's the consequence of actions. Again, we're talking about al-fujjar in this case, right? And the people who had takdeeb, right? ثُمَّ إِنَّهُمْ لَصَالُوا الْجَحِيمِ. They will enter Jahannam. ثُمَّ يُقَالُ هَذَا الَّذِي كُنْتُمْ بِهِ تُكَذِّبُونَ. And it will be said to them, this is what you used to deny. But you say, but Allah, oh Allah, I believed in you. Well, let's look at the evidence recorded. But it's going to be said to them, right? هَذَا الَّذِي كُنْتُمْ بِهِ تُكَذِّبُونَ. This is what you used to deny and reject. But Allah, I believed in you. But what does your record say? Kitabun marqum. What does your record say? Not only that, let's look at your hearts. How does the stain look? Because that's physical proof. And Allah doesn't need the proof. It's for us. That's for us. So let's start with the next section, inshallah. I hope that summary was okay. It took a little bit longer, but I really wanted to make sure that we cover it because the next section obviously is tied to it, inshallah. Okay. So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. You can't say it, so I'll just repeat after me, inshallah. كلا إن كتاب الأبرار لفي عليين. وما أدراك ما عليون. كتاب مرقوم يشهده المقربون. So كلا إن كتاب الأبرار لفي عليين. Now we're talking about the other side, which is al-abrar. Now abrar is a general term. We talked about this term in Surah Al-Infitar, just like fujjar. Abrar and fujjar will come opposite, right? And abrar means, we already talked about this earlier today, it's the virtuous conduct. It has nothing to do with belief. It's not a philosophical or a belief aspect of people or characteristic. It has to do with conduct. How do people conduct themselves? And abrar comes from bir. Bir is to have virtuous conduct. That's why bir al-walidain, right? Bir al-walidain, having virtuous conduct with your parents. This concept of bir. Al-abrar have bir, have this virtuous conduct. So كلا إن كتاب الأبرار لفي عليين. So indeed, so no, remember, kalla is tied to what in this case? The section starts with kalla again. What does kalla mean? Yes? Indeed, right? Indeed. So what is it connected to? Indeed for what? Yeah, but what is it referring back to? So remember the section of fujjar, kalla, it started also with kalla, right? Kalla inna kitab al-fujjari. So what did that go back to? ألا يظن أولئك أنهم مبعوثون ليوم عظيم يوم يقوم الناس لرب العالمين كلا. Right? So the kalla here is going back to, don't they know that one day that they will be resurrected ليوم عظيم, to a magnificent day, يوم يقوم الناس لرب العالمين, when people will stand for accountability before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Indeed, inna kitab al-abrari in this case. The book of al-abrar is where? In Illiyin. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا عِلِّيِّينَ. So Illiyin, again, is a term. Where is this? Right? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا عِلِّيِّينَ. And where, so what do you know of Illiyun? Again, ma adraka is the same question that was asked before, right? And what do you know of Aliyun? Yes. We're answering it, right? And Allah is asking, and what do you know of Aliyun? What's the answer? Kitabun marqum, the same answer that was given to a different question, right? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا سِجِّينَ for the Fujjar, the book of the Fujjar. Now it's the book of Al-Abrar. Where is it? Kitabun marqum. What do you know about? It's Kitab marqum. Same thing. The books look the same on the outside. The difference is the contents. What's inside? What's recorded? Remember, the surah talks about actions, decisions, choices that are recorded and that they have consequences. So everything is recorded. Kitabun marqum. Kitab is a book. Marqum comes from raqam, which is obviously counting, but also we talked about the term حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم means to write things down. Kitabun marqum, it's recorded. Same answer. Same answer. It looks like the same book, but the inside's what's different. And because of the inside's what's different, the location's going to be different. And we talked about how, for humans, psychologically, when you talk about something being in a place, it actually is somewhere in a place, physically. It gives people assurance that it exists. Right? Something that's abstract, when you say this is an abstract thing, for people, have a hard time not believing, but understanding it or comprehending it. But when you say something is in that location, it's easier for the mind to say, okay, yes, I get it, I understand. This is something that's physically recorded. So the books are it's a physical book. Kitabun marqum. Yashhaduhu al-muqarrabun. It is witnessed by the people who are close. Al-muqarrabun are people who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or creation that is close to Allah. It can include angels, prophets, shuhada, salihin. So the book of Al-Abrar. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala write us from Al-Abrar. Imagine that person who gets their book, and they get it in their right hand, right? And they're so happy that a gathering is held for that person, where the angels and the prophets, and you see Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salam sitting, Sayyidina Dawood, Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, they're all sitting, and you're standing there, and they're witnessing you getting your book. And you stand there, and you're proud to hold it up. And you say, this is my book. The only time you're allowed, by the way, to be proud is on the Day of Judgment. You're okay to be proud on the Day of Judgment. You say, this is what I've done. And everyone's witnessing. The people who are closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are witnessing you receive your book in your right hand. Yashhaduhu al-muqarrabun. What a feeling that is. We have ceremonies for huffaz, for example. People gather, we celebrate. It's very nice for everybody, but especially for the person who's graduating or is a hafid now, right? Imagine on the Day of Judgment that you have the most special people that were ever created, and they're sitting there witnessing you and celebrating you. It's a great feeling. It's all recorded. Kitabun marqum. Yashhaduhu al-muqarrabun. We'll move on, inshallah. إِنَّ الْأَبْرَارَ لَفِي نَعِيمٍ عَلَى الْأَرَائِكِ يَنظُرُونَ تعرف في وجوههم نضرة النعيم يسقون من رحيق مختوم ختامه مسك وفي ذلك فليتنافس المتنافسون ومزاجه من تسنيم عينا يشرب بها المقربون. So, إن الأبرار لفي نعيم. So we talked about abrar, they will be in na'im. Na'im is a general term, so a lot of people use it to say it's Jannah, right? It's a way to describe Jannah. It means bliss or luxury. And by the way, that bliss or luxury is not just in akhirah. We talked about these are consequences, right, of our actions. Dunya has consequences and akhirah has consequences. To actually be in luxury in this world is the believers and the abrar can live in comfort in this dunya, even though it's difficult and they go through hardships, because they have contentment in their hearts. Because they know that things that happen to them for a reason, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of what's happening to them. So you can actually enter a state of happiness even though dunya is difficult. Right? من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة. Whoever does good deeds from believing men or women, Allah says, فلنحيينه حياة طيبة. They will have a haya that's pure, that's طيبة. Right? Haya is not meant to be in dunya, because you're a believer, it's all gloom. It's not because it's what's around you, it's because it's what's inside you, right? It's what your perception and perspective is that you develop. And you see things from a different lens, and so you're happy and content. So, إِنَّ الْأَبْرَارَ لَفِي نَعِيمٍ. Na'im obviously is na'im in dunya, but also in na'im in akhirah. The luxury. And this is not a physical luxury. People think of luxury as just having things around them. Expensive, gold and jewelry and, fancy, drinks and food. It's not just that, but the na'im is also a emotional na'im, right? The feeling of emotion that you have, you're always in a state of happiness, of contentment, of satisfaction. It's also an intellectual na'im, right? And Allah describes them, عَلَى الْأَرَائِكِ يَنْظُرُونَ. Ara'iki, they're sitting and they're on couches, reclining. When you're reclining, right? The word reclining, which is muttaki'un, which is in another ayah in the Quran. عَلَى الْأَرَائِكِ مُتَّكِئُونَ or يَتَّكِئُونَ. To recline is to understand that there's nothing that you have to run to. You're completely in a state of relaxation. There's nothing preoccupying your mind or distracting you or saying, I have to do this tomorrow or this or this. You're in a state of comfort and relaxation. The state that you and I probably maybe even get, maybe a few seconds if we're lucky in this life. In akhirah is part of the bliss and the luxury. Ala al-ara'iki. So we're talking about here two luxuries. The luxury of rest and comfort and nothing to worry about. Ala al-ara'iki yanzurun. And that's the other bliss. They're looking at things they've never seen before. That bliss of looking and seeing things in Jannah that we haven't experienced. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't talk about what they're looking at, because the next ayah says, تَعْرِفُ فِي وُجُوهِهِمْ نَضْرَةَ النَّعِيمِ. You will know from looking at them, you will recognize by just looking at them that they have brightness, radiance from their face. So nadra means to fill, right? So those people are filled with satisfaction. They're filled with comfort and happiness. They're in a state of, it's filled. Like, you can't get any more than that. And how do you know that? Just by looking at them. So the description is beautiful, because you know someone. How many times do you walk through someone without talking to them, or you go to someone without talking to them? You know something's bothering them because of the look on their face. Or they're happy because of the look on their face. Allah is saying from what they're looking at, you can see that that's reflecting on their faces. So that means they're looking at luxury and bliss that we can't even imagine. تَعْرِفُ فِي وُجُوهِهِمْ نَضْرَةَ النَّعِيمِ. No stress, no upset, no sadness. يُسْقَوْنَ مِنْ رَحِيقٍ مَخْتُومٍ. And it's not يَشْرَبُونَ, it's يُسْقَوْنَ. يَشْرَبُونَ is they're drinking. يُسْقَوْنَ is they're actually being given the drink. You're being served. مِنْ رَحِيقٍ مَخْتُومٍ. Rahiq makhtum is a pure wine. In today's context, the word rahiq is used, it's kind of like the bee taking the nectar from the flower, so it's like the nectar. But that's today's application of the word. Rahiq makhtum is a pure wine. Imagine the scenery, right? Reclining, beaming faces, being given drinks of complete luxury. Khitamuhu misk. Khitam means the ending. And misk is the smell, a fragrance. Now, this can mean one of two things or more. One of it is that the drink is stamped and sealed. So it's given to you, it's never been touched before, never been altered. Pure, coming to you, untouched in its state of purity. It could also mean that the state, the khitamuhu misk, is that the end state of those people is misk. So either one works, inshallah. وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. And in that shall the competitors compete. يَتَنَافَس, to compete, الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. Now, I want to spend some time on this because a lot of us, unfortunately, in the ummah, don't understand tanafus. Tanafus is competition. The dunya example, or the understanding of tanafus, or competition in dunya, is that I finish first, I win the race, and nobody else does. We're all running to win a race, and we're number one. That's what tanafus means in a dunya perspective. But in the akhirah perspective, or in the Islamic perspective, وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. And in that, right, for that luxury, shall the competitors compete with each other. Competition in Islam is that you strive to do better than everybody around you. But when somebody else does better than you, you're happy for them. It's not that they've succeeded and you've lost. That's the dunya interpretation. Success, tanafus, in competition is even if someone beats you, you're extremely happy. Why? Why? Why are we happy when somebody beats us? Well, there's many reasons why. Because our purpose here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worshipped and His commands are followed in this life. Right? That's our purpose, we're guardians of that. We're khulafa to do that. That's our responsibility. When somebody beats us to khair, that's good. That means that somebody has taken the level higher for the ummah, for the inhabitants of earth. So why are we upset that they did better than us? They just improved the level of the ummah. They brought the da'wah success. Even they did better than us. It's not about us. It's about the jama'ah. Who's benefiting the jama'ah the most? If somebody is better than me at something, great. I'm happy for them. The competition is, no, I want it worse for them, so I want it. That's dunya. We want best, whoever achieves it. We try to do it, but if somebody beats us to it, not because we're lazy, but we tried hard, but yet they did better, we're happy. Imagine thinking this way, right? It's like the analogy of a basketball team. The dunya understanding of a superstar is they score all their points or all the goals. They're the best player on the team. That competition is they're the best. Somebody who looks for individual gain. I'm the best on the team, that's success for me. The Islamic understanding of competition is that I'm a member of the team, and if somebody on the team does better than I am, it improves the whole team. It improves the whole team. It's not about me. I'd like to be the best because I want to be the best in the sight of Allah. But if somebody does better, it's improved all of us. It's improved the jama'ah. It's improved the ummah. So why should I feel down or bad or have envy or jealousy towards someone? I should be happy for them. And this is the tanafus we're talking about. The success of the jama'ah, if the jama'ah is successful, that means we're successful. Right? If the jama'ah is successful, if the congregation, if the ummah is successful, that means we're successful because we're part of that. The example that we have we have many examples. Umar radiallahu anh, who did he used to compete with? Abu Bakr, right? Abu Bakr. So every time Umar would do something, Abu Bakr would one-up him, right? To the point where one day Umar, when they were preparing for the Battle of Tabuk, Umar radiallahu anh brought about 4,000 dirhams, right? He brought it to the Prophet because he wanted to fund the army. And he's basically giving lots of his wealth for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he came in and he's saying, describing this as, I finally figured out how I can beat Abu Bakr. So I gave 4,000 dirhams to the Prophet ﷺ. Then Abu Bakr came and radiallahu anh, and he gave 3,000. And he said, I beat Abu Bakr. Finally, I did it, right? And the Prophet ﷺ asked Umar, what did you leave for your family? It's a lot of money. What did you leave? He said, I left half of my wealth. This half. Still have another half. Half's a lot, right? Imagine giving half. And then the Prophet asked Abu Bakr, how much did you leave for your family? He said, I left them Allah and His Prophet. He gave everything. And so that tells you it's not the amount, but it's how much you have from what you've got. You give. So Umar knew, I can't beat Abu Bakr. Was he ever upset with Abu Bakr? Did he ever have any animosity towards Abu Bakr? Did he feel jealous of Abu Bakr? There was nothing in his heart, radiallahu anh, had anything wrong towards Abu Bakr. He loved him. That's tanafus. وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ وَمِزَاجُهُ مِنْ تَسْنِيمٍ. So mizaj is its composition, it's what it's made of, tasneem. What's tasneem? Here's what I want to kind of just talk a little bit about the luxuries of the hereafter, of Jannah. Most luxuries in Jannah that are mentioned in the Quran are luxuries that we have in dunya. Of course, in Jannah they're a million times better, right? Infinitely times better. But the reason, Allahu A'lam, that we are told most of what's in the Quran, most of the Quran describing Jannah, is in terms that we understand, the luxuries of Jannah, things that we understand, we can relate to, right? Because we have them in dunya. So a'nab, right? Grapes and fruits, we have them here. Of course, in Jannah, it's a different whole level, right? Differently entire level. But we can relate because we have experience with it. Most of the things that are talked about in Jannah are things that we have in dunya so that we can relate to them and understand them. Because if we don't understand them, then what's the incentive? It's hard. It's hard to incentivize it. But there are parts in the Quran, like this one, where the luxuries of Jannah, they don't have an equivalent in dunya. So we don't know. We don't know. And that's just to show you that, and to show me that these things in Jannah are far beyond our imagination. Tasneem. What's tasneem? عَيْنًا يَشْرَبُ بِهَا الْمُقَرَّبُ. It is a spring. It's a spring. What's the spring? What's the material? We don't know. And if we can't know on the simplest, as simple as a drink in Jannah, imagine everything else. The food and the palaces and all of the things in Jannah. If there are things in Jannah simply as a drink, and we have, how many drinks exist on earth? There's like millions, if not, right? Like it, if not more than that. There's a drink everywhere you go is a special kind of drink. But there's a drink in Jannah that you don't have access to. You don't even know what it is. And it's left for Jannah. عَيْنًا يَشْرَبُ بِهَا الْمُقَرَّبُونَ and not يَشْرَبُ مِنْهَا. It's not a spring that people drink from. Not minha, but biha. That material is going to be mixed. Al-muqarrabun, those who are close to Allah, will get that material and be mixed with their rahiq makhtum. It'll be a blended drink. What is it? We don't know. But there are luxuries in Jannah that we don't know. And that's the beauty, is there's things to look forward to that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept for for people of Jannah. May Allah make us of them. Okay. Let's continue on, inshallah, to finish. We started a bit late, so we will go towards about 1:15 or so, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. We're going to enter now. So we've talked about the first section of the surah, talking about al-mutaffifin as an example of people who take a specific type of choice, who have a double standard. Then we talked about, in the next section, the choices are recorded and have consequences. The consequences are dunya and akhirah consequences. Now we will finish the surah with a second example. Like we started with a first example, a second example of people who take a specific type of choice for us to understand. Okay? إن الذين أجرموا كانوا من الذين آمنوا يضحكون. وإذا مروا بهم يتغامزون. وإذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم انقلبوا فكهين. وإذا رأوهم قالوا إن هؤلاء لضالون. وما أرسلوا عليهم حافظين. فاليوم الذين آمنوا من الكفار يضحكون. على الأرائك ينظرون. هل ثوب الكفار ما كانوا يفعلون. إن الذين أجرموا كانوا من الذين آمنوا يضحكون. So أجرموا comes from jarima, or a crime, somebody who commits a crime. Now أجرموا is a term given to people, again, it's people who are in society that are opposing khair or ma'ruf or goodness or ethics. They go against ethics. They go against what's appropriate. Again, yes, poor code of conduct, but they're going against the norm, or what's basically understood to be wrong, fundamentally to be wrong. And so that includes both belief and action. And you notice here it says amanu, الذين أجرموا, and they used to laugh at الذين آمنوا. So أجرموا and آمنوا, these are two terms, right? Two terms, two terms that show you that these are actually opposites. So the opposite usually that we think of iman is kufr. So mu'mineen and kafirin. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us otherwise here. That the opposite of mu'mineen is الذين أجرموا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أفنجعل المسلمين كالمجرمين, right? In Surah Al-Qalam. So it involves both a belief and an action, because iman is both, mu'mineen is belief and action. So they come together. One aspect, one common denominator for people who are mujrimeen is that they conduct themselves and they have a bad characteristic of istihza, or they sukhriya. Istihza is to make fun of or mock people, or to put them down. Okay, so these people who have ajramu, who are that characteristic, who are those types of people that again lack iman and go against the conduct of society and the morals and the ethics, they have a common denominator, is that they put people down, they mock them, they laugh at people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying to us, الذين أجرموا كانوا من الذين آمنوا يضحكون. They would laugh at the believers. وإذا مروا بهم يتغامزون, and they would pass by them. يتغامزون is actually a couple of meanings we can talk about. One is that they wink, but there's another one also, is that, you know, when you nudge someone to get their attention, when somebody does something like silly or funny, and you nudge your friend, and you look to tell them, look over there, you start laughing, right? It's that يتغامزون. وإذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم انقلبوا فكهين. And when they go back to their clan, أهلهم is their people, their family, their friends, their clan. انقلبوا, they go back فكهين. Fakihin is to take something lighthearted, joking, right? As an amusement or as a joke. So is there anything wrong with joking? There isn't. But what's wrong here is that the context of the ayah. The context is those people are laughing at those who are believers. And they are يتغامزون with their friends or others to get their attention to laugh with them. They're encouraging laughter and mockery with other people towards that person. And when they go back to their clan, انقلبوا فكهين. They go back in jest. So they don't go back nadimin, not انقلبوا nadimin. They go back and regret and say, I shouldn't have done that. You know what? I talked about that. I made fun of that person. I put them down. I commented about, what they used to do in the past, and I feel bad about it. So I go, I talk to my family or my clan about it. No, I go back in jest, in amusement. Say, did you see here what that person did? And I further, bring that to that group of people that I'm close with. So how does this all fit in? You'll see, inshallah. وإذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم انقلبوا فيهم وإذا رأوهم, and when they see them, they see the believers, قالوا إن هؤلاء لضالون. They will say that those people are misguided. And the word ضالون is misguided, but it's misguided from the belief aspect. They say those people, it's a religious term, right? ضلالة, or misguidance, is something that has to do with your belief. Their belief is misguided. So you see here a behavior of people towards believers. الذين أجرموا, towards believers. And these are actions that they're doing to put people down. Okay? So, وَمَا أُرْسِلُوا عَلَيْهِمْ حَافِظِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and they were not sent to them as keepers. So they say, إِنَّ هَؤُلَاءِ ضَالُّونَ, right? They point at the believer and say, those people are misguided. And Allah is saying, وَمَا أُرْسِلُوا عَلَيْهِمْ حَافِظِينَ. We did not put them keepers over them. So why are they even commenting? We didn't put them in charge of them. We didn't put them responsible for them. It's a rhetorical question, right? Or a statement. وَمَا أُرْسِلُوا عَلَيْهِمْ حَافِظِينَ. They were not put as keepers above them. What's in this for us? Someone is putting somebody down. That's not an appropriate action. Now, as believers, we should also not put people who we don't think necessarily follow the truth, or believers, or people who are sinful. We should not also do the same thing, because doing the same thing would be mutaffif. Right? This is the lesson. The lesson is, just because someone is misguided or does a specific action, whether it's drink or smoke, that doesn't allow us to say points and mock, put down, judge. وَمَا أُرْسِلُوا عَلَيْهِمْ حَافِظِينَ. Those people weren't, the people who are making these comments and gestures and mockery, they weren't put keepers over the believers. So as believers, why would we do that to them? Because otherwise that would be a characteristic of a mutaffif. وَمَا أُرْسِلُوا عَلَيْهِمْ حَافِظِينَ. You're not put in charge over them. What makes you think that you can comment or mock or put people down? You are not responsible for them or their actions. Worry about yourself, is the lesson we should take. Worry about, each and every one of us has to worry about themselves. Because we are not guardians, we are not hafidhin. Hafidh is to protect or to guard. Right? Somebody hafidh al-Quran, we use it for memorize the Quran, but it's somebody who is protecting the Quran or keeping the Quran. وَمَا أُرْسِلُوا عَلَيْهِمْ حَافِظِينَ. Who are you or me to say these things to other people? We're not their guardians, we're not their keepers. We have to worry about ourselves. If we just continue to use our time, consume it with worrying about our actions, our belief, our connection with Allah, how we conduct ourselves, that will fill our time, I promise you. We don't need to worry about other people and comment and put people down, because we wouldn't like it for us. So why would we do it for other people? Again, mutaffifin. And this is the example at the end of the surah. So we talked about the example at the beginning of the surah, and now at the end of the surah. فَالْيَوْمَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنَ الْكُفَّارِ يَضْحَكُونَ. So on that day, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, now the believers, مِنَ الْكُفَّارِ يَضْحَكُونَ. It'll be the other way around. So don't do it in this life. Don't put people down. Don't laugh at people just because they are in the wrong, or you see them as people who sin and they're not, they're not worthy of your time, or you think you're better than them, or I think I'm better than this person or that person. That's not what we're asked to do. وَمَا أُرْسِلُوا عَلَيْهِمْ حَافِظِينَ. But there's justice too. So on the day of judgment, Allah will get that for us, or them, or whoever it is. فَالْيَوْمَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنَ الْكُفَّارِ يَضْحَكُونَ. On that day, because Allah allows it on that day. So we shouldn't take that choice now. It will happen. It will happen on the day of judgment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow it to happen because that's justice. But we are not keepers over others to do that ourselves here. وَمَا أُرْسِلُوا عَلَيْهِمْ حَافِظِينَ فَالْيَوْمَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنَ الْكُفَّارِ يَضْحَكُونَ. So kuffar here, that the term kuffar is to lump all types of people, whether it's fasiqeen, whether it's fujjar, all sorts of people who are wrong belief or wrongdoings, all under one umbrella. Because on the day of judgment, it's really two sides. آمنوا من الكفار يضحكون على الأرائك ينظرون. The believers are sitting على الأرائك. Here's another mention of أرائك. They're reclining on couches. ينظرون. They're looking. They're looking. And there is a Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, commented that there's a wall between the people of paradise and hellfire that will be opened, so it'll have gates that'll open, that the believers can, as they're reclining on their couches in Jannah, they can observe the condition of the disbelievers in the hellfire, whenever they please. عَلَى الْأَرَائِكِ يَنظُرُونَ. So justice will be served. But this is why when we get into arguments or disputes or quarrels with anyone, he said, she said, right? We get into that a lot. The easiest thing to do, the easiest thing to do is back away from that and say, we have differences, they're not going to work out. For whatever they've wronged me, I think I'm right, they think they're right. For whatever they wrong me, I'm going to forgive them. And I'm going to leave the matter to Allah on the day of judgment. Oh Allah, I've forgiven them. I'm not going to remind them of what they did to me. I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to discuss it anymore. I've left the matter to you, and I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on. That's the best advice we can have. I'm going to leave it to Allah on the day of judgment. The ultimate is to actually have afwa on people. Is to forgive and forget completely, and to say, oh Allah, don't take them to account for what they've done to me. But I recognize that's hard. That's extremely hard. But the minimum that we should strive for is, we've forgiven them, we leave their matter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because there are some things that are very difficult to overcome. Of course, it's always best to have afwa on people, because we want the afwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We ask Allah for afwa, so we should have afwa on people, right? But the minimum is we say, oh, I'm not going to remind them of this. I'm not going to discuss it. I'm not going to talk to people about what they've done to me. Oh Allah, I've forgiven them. I leave the matter in your hands. And I'll focus myself on improving myself, guiding, counseling, people who are willing to take my advice, and I will inspire competition, healthy competition. وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. So the last ayah. هل ثوب الكفار ما كانوا يفعلون. It's a question. It's a rhetorical question that will be asked on the day of judgment. ثوب comes from thawab, recompense, consequence. The surah talks about recording and consequence. So Allah is asking a rhetorical question. هل ثوب الكفار. Did the kuffar not get recompensed for what they used to do? بما كانوا يفعلون. يفعلون is a more generic term than يعملون. It includes actions and sayings and everything. Have they not been recompensed for what they used to do? And the people of Jannah will say, Naam, Ya Rabb, on the day of judgment, when this question is asked. And the people who unfortunately engage in this behavior will not answer, because they know. They know. The day of judgment, we have to understand, the day of judgment it's actually not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's for us. What do I mean by that? Judgment, Allah knows where somebody is going and where he or she, how much they've tried in their life. He subhanahu wa ta'ala decides where they go. He knows. He could easily deem this person to Jannah and this person to hellfire without any discussion, without any book. That day of judgment is not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The matter, Allah knows where this person are going to be. It's for us because imagine, this is the justice of Allah. Imagine that someone is told, you're going here to hellfire, wa'iyadu billah. What's the reaction of that person? Without any courts. Why, right? Why am I going there? So the day of judgment is for that person. When they see their book, they come to terms with it. It's justice for people so that they don't feel like they've been oppressed, because they know that the accountability is there and everything is there and everything is in a book that's stored, recorded, protected. And that day of judgment is for us so that, yes, we understand. That's why. That's why I'm ending up there, or that's why I'm going in. Right? So it's for us. هل ثوب الكفار ما كانوا يفعلون. So consequence. And you see the laughter is consistent. People who laugh in dunya, they will not laugh in the akhirah, and vice versa. I'm talking about mockery and laughter about other people, right? And so we should never be of those people. If nobody likes, let's get this good. Nobody likes to be made fun of. Nobody on earth likes to be made fun of. So why do we make fun of people? Isn't that mutaffifin? So that's the lesson here, is that if those people, if fujjar, are laughing at people or mocking at people, they themselves do not like to be laughed at. So that's the example of mutaffifin. What does mutaffifin mean? Yes? Double standards, right? الذين إذا اكتالوا على الناس يستوفون. They expect full measure when it comes to them, but when it's the other person, وإذا كالوهم أو وزنهم يخسرون, they take away from it. And this is the main concept of the surah, and it has to do with choices. The choices we take when we deal with others. And those choices are recorded, and there's consequences. The consequences are in dunya and akhirah. That covers, inshallah, Surah Al-Mutaffifin. Any questions or comments or discussion? Okay. Jazakumullah khair. So inshallah this time we'll keep. Looks like the class, most people did show up. Took time, but please try to be here by noon, inshallah, next week. I figured maybe 8:30 Sundays is better for people, which is counterintuitive, but alhamdulillah, it looks like most people showed up. But inshallah, so we can end on time, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. And obviously we have to prepare the hall for prayer time, inshallah. So just the last things that I mentioned at the beginning of the class. The assignments, if you haven't submitted it, please submit it online, even if it's late. We are going to continue on until the 15th, including the 15th of April, inshallah. And then the semester will finish because it'll be Eid. After Eid, we'll announce the date. I won't be immediately after Eid. Inshallah, maybe a couple weeks after Eid, we will have our exam for the first term, which will cover the first 2 clusters of surah, so up to Surah Al-Buruj, including Surah Al-Buruj, which we haven't obviously finished yet. And then the second term, inshallah, will cover cluster 3 and 4, and we'll try to wrap up the course in 2 semesters, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Okay? I think I've met with most people. Some I've talked to in person here, which is fine, inshallah, for the one-on-ones. Some I've had the phone call. If you still wanted to talk about the course, the pace, the content, how heavy, how light it is, any confusion, please reach out, inshallah, we can schedule a one-on-one. With that, please make sure you sign in for your attendance if you're a credit student. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت استغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون. وسلام على المرسلين.